Hey everybody, my name is Chris and I'm a tutor here at Chegg.com. I mostly do math and a little bit of computer science. And in this video, we're going to do an example of solving an equation in quadratic form. So what's an equation in quadratic form? Well, before we talk about that, let's briefly review quadratic equations. So we'll go to page 2 and review quadratic equations. In general, they're equations of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so these are quadratic equations because we have an x and an x squared. Well, we can have this form more generally with things that are not just x, but maybe something more complicated than x. So, for example, maybe we can have ax to the fourth plus bx squared plus c equals 0. So notice this is not a quadratic equation. However, it is in quadratic form because, well, first of all, we can rewrite this as ax squared, where the x squared is being squared, right? Because remember, x to the fourth is x squared squared. So we can rewrite that like that, okay? So then we still have plus bx squared plus c equals 0, okay? So here we have a thing, and then we have that thing squared. So in this case, our thing in the box here is x squared. Then over here, we still have x squared being squared. So in general, an equation in quadratic form is something like a times a thing squared plus b times that thing plus c equals 0. So for a quadratic equation, that thing is just plain old x. But for more generally, we can have an equation in quadratic form, which is, in which case we have the thing being more complicated than just plain old x. All right, so let's go ahead and see how is this an equation in quadratic form. Well, x to the 2/3, we can rewrite that as x to the 1/3 times 2. Okay, so that's x to the 1/3 times 2, and another way to write that is x to the 1/3 squared. So this equation then actually becomes x to the 1/3 squared minus 5 times, let's say, x to the 1/3 in parentheses like this. So these parentheses right here are not necessary at all, but no harm in putting them there. Then we have plus 6 equals 0. So now what we want to do is make a substitution. So let's go ahead and substitute, because here we have x to the 1/3, x to the 1/3, and this equation is still pretty messy because of the 1/3 and the exponent here. Kind of makes this look more complicated than it really is. So what we can do is make a substitution to make this equation look less complicated. So let's go ahead and say u equals x to the 1/3. All right, and then what we're going to have is u squared, therefore, is x to the 1/3 squared. Okay, or in other words, x to the 2/3, but you know. So then this becomes now u squared minus 5u plus 6 equals 0. Now this here is just a plain old quadratic equation. So that's what's nice about equations in quadratic form, is you can make some kind of substitution at some point along the line to transform the equation into a plain old quadratic equation. And this here, if we look closely at this, we see that we can actually factor it. So let's go ahead and do that. If we factor this, we get u minus 2 times u minus 3 equals 0. And then that's going to give us u equals 2 or u equals 3. All right, now we're not done yet, right? Even though we just solved this equation, we're not done yet because we have to solve for x. Okay, our original equation was in terms of x, so we have to go back and solve for x. Well, all we have to do now is back substitute. So if u is x to the 1/3 and u equals 2, then x to the 1/3 equals 2. Also, x to the 1/3 equals 3. All right, so now we have two separate equations that we need to solve for x. So basically, for each of these two equations, all we have to do is raise both sides to the 3rd power. So let's go to page 3, just because we're running out of room there. So there's actually not much left to do. So we have x to the 1/3 equals 2, and x to the 1/3 equals 3. So all we have to do is raise both sides to the 3rd power. All right, so x to the 1/3 to the 3rd power is just plain old x, and then 2 cubed is 8. And then same thing over here, x to the 1/3 to the 3rd power, and 3 cubed. So x to the 1/3 to the 3rd power is x, and 3 to the 3rd power is 27. So these are the two solutions to our original equation. So x equals 8 or x equals 27. So again, one of the main points here is that an equation in quadratic form can be simplified a little bit, and then, well, maybe not simplified, but the point is an equation in quadratic form can be possibly modified a little bit, and whether it can or not, eventually, you'll be able to make a substitution to put the equation back into or to express the equation as a plain old quadratic equation. And then when it's a plain old quadratic equation, it'll be more comfortable, more familiar. You'll probably be able to more easily see what you can do to solve it. So this has been an example of solving an equation in quadratic form. I hope you found it helpful, and thank you for watching.